You're listening to the episode of Mr. Allard's Neighborhood. This is a place we're entitled to Brad's opinion. And now for your host, Brad Allard.
Hey, everybody. I'm going to try to do this right for the first time. I've been doing this 4+ years, and I forgot to turn the sound down. It drives me crazy. But anyway, so I'm with William Carlson. He's going to talk to us about AI, artificial intelligence. I know nothing about this. And so I'll be asking some questions like, hey, what is it? How do you spell AI? And that kind of stuff. But it's going to be an interesting conversation because AI is becoming a real issue, particularly in the field of education. I was reading about this in the Washington Post yesterday, how colleges are having to react to it.
Yep.
And then our friend Seth Reeves over at Centennial posted about it. He's very concerned, as you might guess, because of the potential, shall we say, academic shortcuts that it provides. And that's not a good thing either, because we want them to learn real good. Anyway, and also we have here in the bullpen here, Gage is going to be over here checking us out. This is his first time in a podcast studio. It's real exciting, ain't it?
Yes, sir.
He nods his head, yes. Okay, it's not so bad. Anyway, what exactly is your title now, and who do you work for?
Yeah, so I am the Senior Director of Content for a company called Cybrary, CYBRARY, and we are fundamentally an organization that trains and upskills cybersecurity professionals. So whether you're trying to get into the field, whether you're trying to stay relevant in the field, Cybrary is a place that you can go to accomplish that goal.
How long have you been with them?
I've been with Cybrary 2.5 years now. Previous to coming on full-time, I contracted with them in a number of roles, and I was a learner on their platform back in,
Well,
a few years ago now, we'll put it that way.
Well, your previous employer is well known in this community. Who is it?
Absolutely. So worked for my family here in the community, Mike Carlson Motor Company, managing. The joke was there, Brad, that if it plugs into the wall, it's ultimately my problem.
It's your problem, is it?
Cable box won't come on, call William. Computer won't start up, call William. But at the end of the day, I made sure all the systems are running so that the business could continue to operate.
Yeah, MCMC is well known here. It was one of the first businesses I recognized here, and I thought, what does Mac stand for? But whatever. That's when I moved here back in the day, way back in the day. But now it's also a car rental.
Regional rental, that's right.
Yeah, so anyway, so y'all still have a piece of the community. But before we jump into AI and all this other stuff that I don't know anything about, let's talk about the sponsors, which I do know something about. Okay, hey, CrossFit Burleson, 317 Southwest Wilshire. Go and get yourself a workout. My motto, my little quip for Daniel is, go get fit, don't throw a fit. But anyway, it's over behind the Stone Soup Cafe and all those places, and it's a very nice place. It's got a workout program. It's got trainers. It's got supervision. So you're not just cast out there and see what you can do. You're going to have a organized program, and it'd be good to have one. You know, despite the weather now, I bet it's going to get cold soon again, and it'd be a good place to go work out indoors. Also, Shandy, of course, you know Shandy well. A friend of ours from school, Shandy Stogsdill Group. She is the person that everybody should go to if they're going to move in and around this area, because she knows where all the real estate is, where the bargains are, and that kind of thing. And she'll be on next Monday. I got my schedules all messed up, but anyway, she'll be on next Monday, and we'll talk a little bit about real estate. But she also has something else she wants to talk about, so we'll see what happens then. So tune in next Monday for Shandy. Also, Our Place. Everybody goes to Our Place. I know you go to Our Place
Regularly.
Yeah, you know Otto, and everybody knows Otto. He's like a local celebrity. I always kid about him being like this celebrity maitre d' that comes by and just says, how's it going? Well, if you got a complaint, there's my son. He actually runs it. So Our Place Restaurant, always a good time on the highway in Alsbury. Good food, good place to go and do business. That's where I do a lot of my meetings with people and whatnot. Also, thank you to Wild Cigar and Culture over on Hidden Creek at the Standard. Now that the first round of playoffs over, and surprisingly the Cowboys are still in it, they're going to have a lot of specials and a lot of opportunities to go and watch the game with your friends over at Wild.
I know this knucklehead too.
Yeah, I know y'all not just went to school together, y'all were friends.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and y'all worked together or performed together in the show choir and all those things.
You got it.
Yeah, so I mean, this is a high school buddy of yours. But maybe when he turns 18, take Gage out and have a cigar. I actually have to be 21. Sorry, you have to wait a few more years before you smoke your first cigar. You could tell he's really excited about that.
Yeah, he can't wait.
Oh boy, I can't wait. I was about his age when I first tried a cigar, and I puked my guts up. But that's because I was too young. Now, I didn't have a humidor to choose from like you do at Chris's place. So there you go. Also, thank you to Local Life and Tiffany. There is a really good article about her in a magazine called Voyage Dallas. It's an online magazine. So look up voyagedallas.com and check out one of their articles. It has a picture, or several pictures of Tiffany, and it's really a great article, and she does really good work. I believe y'all were in one of the articles, about 5-6 months ago for Hometown Heroes.
I do believe that's the case. Thankfully, it was not me.
Well,
we want to keep viewership high.
That's right.
Readership high for that magazine, that publication.
She had a picture of her, and it looked just like what you'd think she looked like, just happy and laughing, and, because the little Nirvana you provided for her over there. But that was a big deal. So I was glad she was chosen. But anyway, Tiffany's magazine will be out in about 2 weeks. For February, January's already out, and you can check it out at locallifetx.com. Also, have you taken Sarah to Southern Gym yet? Yeah, you go. Tell them, take your mama over to Southern Gym, all right? Robin's there right now. Go say, hey. Anyway, they're busy as can be. I mean, their business has really done well, not just because it was Christmas, but a lot of people have really liked having a fact. There's a good place to take your jewelry to be refitted, repaired, cleaned, whatever, and they have inventory, of course. If you wanted to design something for that special someone, Valentine's Day is coming up. You could,
right,
yeah. You can always give her a chocolate and give her a very nice piece of jewelry that she'll remember forever, as opposed to, a box of candy. I mean, really. Anyway, Southern Gym on the top of the Windmiller Building. They'll be down in their bottom floor in about 6 weeks. That's the hope. It depends on construction, weather, you name it. There's always something with construction. Also, HotWorks, infrared workout system over on 731 on John Jones. This is a different type of workout. It's 11 different programs that have all this, like yoga and rowing and biking and, cardio, I guess, as I'm trying to get the word out.
Mm-hmm.
All these things are done with an infrared system, so it maximizes the workout and minimizes the stress on your bones and joints and muscles. And I know several people that go from CrossFit after a pretty heavy duty workout, and they'll go and do a little yoga over here to kind of loosen them up some more and prevent cramping or whatever else. So it's a pretty good combo there. Michelle will be on the show in about 2 weeks. Always enjoy talking with her because we have a nice wide-ranging discussion, which may or may not hit upon health-related issues, but, just for fun. Also, my insurance agent, Texas Farmers Bureau with Melissa Harmon, over at 682-804-0534. She can help you with your insurance. If you want to show her your insurance plan, she could tell you if the Texas Farm Bureau can do better. If not, she'll tell you. But Texas Farm Bureau is a co-op, so a lot of the rates are lower. She did save me some money and help me amp up my insurance, so that's a good thing.
I definitely know the storms that have rolled through seem to be hitting premiums already. So,
I know.
Stay tuned.
Well, it's all that stuff in California. I've been watching it, and it's not going to be unaffected. It's not going to unaffect us. I mean, we're going to be hit by it. I mean, every time there's a hurricane in Florida, our rates take a hit. So does every building materials, and it slows down building here. And so we'll see what happens. Also, we have going on the coat drive over at Trinity Chiropractic. You take a used coat, Dr. Dias and his crew will take a look at you, give you x-rays, they'll give you adjustment if you need one, they'll give you some advice, and they'll give you a program if you care to take it further than that. But you get a free examination and the whole thing for just a used coat. This is with the Beautiful Feet Ministries, Fort Worth, to deal a lot with the homeless. So, I know people that take a coat and with them to give to poor people they see. And that's a good thing. God bless them. But Beautiful Feet is a big-time outfit, and they could get it probably to a person in need even quicker than you can by yourself. So take it on by and get checked out by Dr. Dias and his crew. All right. What exactly is artificial intelligence?
That's what I used to make it through many years of AP US history and economics with some artificial intelligence.
Yeah, artificial intelligence. Okay.
Because I clearly didn't have it.
Okay.
So artificial intelligence, and I'm going to approach this, Brad, very much from a layperson's perspective.
Thank you.
I'm not a data scientist myself. I do know a number of things about it and the way that it impacts cybersecurity in particular, and we'll dive into that as well. But artificial intelligence is a field of study, really, whereby it's math. At the end of the day, we're going to push a lot of information through these really smart algorithms, and they're going to grow and learn and change and figure out how to solve problems for us. So artificial intelligence is the big umbrella term of a number of kind of sub niches. So as we talk about later in the show, there's machine learning, there's in number of other kind of subdomains within artificial intelligence, but it's basically a way for us to put lots of information through and build a mathematical model so that when we put a new piece of information through that same model, it gives us something out the other end that's predictive of the outcomes that we want.
Well, what I gathered from artificial intelligence, it's like almost these programs learn and adapt to new circumstances and come out with different outcomes that maybe you would have had originally. Because in effect, it builds on itself and it learns. That's more or less what you're saying, know, in layman's terms. And that these mathematical programs are created to have a diverse outcome. And whatever's more optimal, diverse outcome, that may be the path that's taken. Are these mathematical programs created by people, or are they created by the AI themselves?
Well, that gets into a little bit of AI inception there a bit, but fundamentally, these are things that are ultimately built by humans, and then those basic models are trained based on the inputs that you put into it, and that's some of the areas where we have likely heard in the news cycle where we start to run afoul of some artificial intelligence. So some areas in your life where you may have seen this show up are a friend of yours uploads a picture to Facebook, and all of a sudden it's automatically tagged you, having never potentially tagged a photo of yourself before. Facebook's model learns who you are, and then in pictures that other people upload, they'll know, oh, Brad Allard's in that picture, and that picture, and that picture, and that picture, which is its own sort of kind of privacy concern.
Yes,
so there's a host of privacy concerns around artificial intelligence. There's also biases present in artificial intelligence, and that all really comes back to the model or the algorithm is only as smart as the information that you put into it. So if the information that you're training the model with is biased in any way, oftentimes the biases out the other end is magnified. And we see that showing up for diversity issues, for facial recognition as it shows up. So minorities are historically underrepresented in the training of those models, and that causes downstream impacts when artificial intelligence is used to identify faces.
Okay, so like your phone, facial recognition on your phone. AI sounds like it's some sort of, Star Wars kind of thing or Star Trek kind of thing, but really a lot of it's fairly mundane use, right?
Yeah, a lot of it is, right? So if you go into Google Photos on your phone and you're searching for a picture that has a dog in it, you can just go search dog. Well, and it's the artificial intelligence behind that begins to recognize, hey, this is a dog because I know the pattern of what a dog ultimately looks like, right?
Well, is it similar to what happens when, you get on Google or you get on Amazon, you get on some shopping network, and then all of a sudden, you're looking for a pair of shoes, and all of a sudden your feeds and your whatever else, you're going to start getting shoe ads all the time. Is that a similar use of AI?
I would say it can be. So AI can power those things to help organizations figure out and learn more about your patterns. But that can be just as simple as, what did Brad go look at here recently? And let's provide some other things in our ad network that are like that thing. So that's relatively straightforward. But the example of how to identify a dog in a picture, you take this AI model and you would set it up, and then you would send it. There are a couple of different ways you can train AI models. One is supervised learning. So it's like, I, as a human, want an AI model that recognizes dogs. So I'm going to push a bunch of pictures of dogs through this tool and see which ones it recognizes right and which ones it recognizes wrong. And yes, this is a dog. Yes, this is a dog. This is a dog, but you got it wrong. And then you help train the model to recognize what you're looking for. There are unsupervised models where you just push a bunch of stuff through it and let the model kind of figure itself out. One's not necessarily right or wrong. It kind of depends on the outcomes. But many of the ones that we're seeing now, and ChatGPT being one that we'll talk about later, is a supervised model where humans have intervened to train the model to do a specific thing better than if the model tried to train itself.
Well, you talk about these models, these mathematical models. I mean, you talk about numbers so high only a dog could hear it, in my mind. I mean, it's like we're not talking about just your simple calculations. We're talking about a very complex mathematical calculation. Am I correct?
Yeah, no, absolutely. As I understand it, you're basically training this computer program to go build a mathematical model about something itself. So if you want it, again, to recognize dogs in a picture, it ultimately learns what a dog looks like by building an equation that says, hey, when I see a picture and all of these things are true and this number ultimately evaluates to yes, then that likely is a dog.
I just try to put my head around the coding that goes into this kind of thing.
I can't even imagine.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's not like it's some simple stuff like I learned in school back in the day. I mean, the coding from that must be incredibly minute and detailed and intense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's an interesting one to call out too here, in that a lot of people look at this and either they think it's magic, or a lot of opinions about this, and they, well, how can I understand artificial intelligence and how it might impact me because I'm not a PhD in math, I'm not a data scientist, I'm not. That's not what I do. But I always respond to people and say, well, you're also probably not a mechanic, but you drive your car every day. You know what maintenance ultimately needs to be done. You have some understanding about how the thing functions and where it fits in your life. And I
hit
think
the button and that's about it for me.
Yeah, and I think artificial intelligence is largely the same, right? You don't have to be a data scientist to begin to understand what the technology is capable of, to begin to understand what to watch for, just to be an informed consumer or sometimes recipient, beneficiary, or worse than that, of artificial intelligence and how it might impact your life.
I think the two things I've read about that concern people about AI is, one is the privacy issue, like you mentioned before, and the other is the military applications. And they're talking about next generation weapons and all this other business. And it sounds like we were joking before the show about Skynet and Terminator and all that other stuff. But it sounds almost like those kind of decisions could be done without you. Now, in a much rougher model, when I was going through graduate school, my first class was on international relations, and I had to create a mathematical model for the possibility of a nation going to war. And I'm thinking, how do you quantify certain things like that? But I read the books and figured it out. All right, I'm no math genius. That was not artificial intelligence, but that's what can happen in the military situation, that decisions are made faster than the human mind can comprehend. And so that's one of the concerns I have. Also in the stock market, it just comes to mind. A lot of people say, the stock market is very, very difficult to break into because you'll say you're watching the stock closely or whatever. Boom, it hits a price you want. You say, I will buy this, and click the button. And by the time you've gone through that process, it's too late because the AI has already snapped all the available shares at that price because they was already plugged into the system. So these guys that have, thinking they're not going to, try to jump on this, they're already behind the schedule.
Yeah, I think some of those are some interesting ones, right? So, circling back to the military use, I'm certain there are some, and some of what drives this, in my opinion, from a military perspective, are other nation states doing the same.
Oh, you can count on it.
It's very much not it's a challenging place, I would say, to take the moral high ground, right? So it's one of those, like the DARPA and others certainly are investing in to try to stay relevant in a space where our adversaries as a nation are likely doing the same. I do know, having known a number of folks in the service, I'll use the Predator drones as an example. I think many, many people in our nation don't understand the level of scrutiny that goes along with a Predator drone strike, even as it stands today, minus any artificial intelligence. And my point in all of that is the number of supervisors and attorneys and commanding officers that are present in a room when one of those drone strikes actually happens. Most people are astounded to hear that we have the level of human engagement and interaction in those strikes that we do. And I would hope and imagine that as a nation, we would do something very similar and not just allow AI to make a final call on something, because there's a lot to be said about how much faster we can operate if AI can identify things that could be of interest and still having a final human yes/no on that particular target.
Well, it's interesting because a couple examples of that in a much earlier sense. There was a movie made back in, I think, 1964 called Failsafe, where a false alarm triggered a nuclear war and that kind of thing. Another one in 1983, they had a situation where the Soviets had a false reading on their radars, and they thought it was going to be a bombing raid. But the colonel that was stationed there said, this doesn't look like what I've been trained to look for in a bombing raid. So he disregarded it, and turned out to be a flock of birds or reflections, or they don't really even know what it is, but there were no planes involved. And so that person saved us from potential nuclear confrontation. A lot of people worry about AI operating so fast, it'll happen before we even know it. Or maybe not so dramatic as a nuclear confrontation, but, just any kind of incident like that.
Yeah, and I think the general consensus among folks that are really on the inside is that AI is not nearly mature enough to be making those calls. They're absolutely, even with all of the empowering technology that we have today, AI included, there is a really unique situation where humans still fit in. And for better or for worse, as piles of walking flesh, we are really difficult to replace even by the smartest of AI models. So my personal prediction is that we'll continue to see that for many, many more years to come. It doesn't mean we shouldn't be concerned, but I don't think, we're not at Skynet yet. They're not about to take over the world.
I've also read a little bit about AI in the medical field and uses for that. You probably know more about that than I do, but I heard that they could use it for diagnosis, and they could use it for medical treatments, and what the appropriate dosage is, et cetera, et cetera. And they could do that, make the decision for the doctor almost.
Yeah, so I think a couple of places like that you see that showing up are medical field, and also in I saw a really interesting, and this is a while back now, but in sentencing recommendations for courts.
Really,
and why that works is because humans, cognitively, we're only capable of thinking about so many things or considering so many factors at once as we're making a decision. Right? We can decompose decisions down into a matrix of factors, and we can try to. Our mental calculator is only capable of computing so many variables, as it were, at once. But if I take an AI model and I train it, and I say, yes, this was a known tumor, early stage. And then what can happen is those models begin to know, and we have the benefit at that point in time as human beings of having hindsight be 20/20. When you're diagnosing a tumor, you don't know up front. You're using your best judgment. But when we're training an artificial intelligence model based on known facts, this was a tumor and we've seen it progress, the model begins to really learn what those tumors begin to look like. And they found in a number of studies that in certain cases, not all, but in certain cases, certain AI models, and again, there can be thousands of different models. They're not all one and the same, right? It's all depend on the training that you put them through, but certain AI models are better at identifying certain types of cancers than humans can be. At the end of the day, am I going to hang my hat on what an AI model said as a patient? Probably not. But if that makes the diagnostic outcomes that much better, then I certainly want that technology on my side.
Right. And the proponents of AI, these are the things they talk about, is all the great things can happen. But I think a lot of people are leery about it, not because we just watch science fiction movies all the time, but we've seen them for all our lives, but also because it does seem like technology is becoming so pervasive in our life that it just, from the phones, we have. I mean, it still is a matter of amazement to me that I pick up my phone and I have more access to knowledge than people did 50 years ago, if they had access to everything practically. And I have it right here in my hand. And so I have more access to information and news and whatever else than anybody else you could think of 20 years ago. And my phone's not even the most modern one.
An interesting conversation probably for another day, but it's just some of the research on how having ready access to so much information is actually making us dumber.
Oh gosh, no, we get it. No, when I was still at the high school, we would get readings sent to us by some of the administrators off campus and on about the impact, not just of social media like Facebook and TikTok wasn't a thing then, Instagram, but what you're talking about, the flood of information that just basically buries you, and it just causes people to zone out. And that's kind of what's happening here with AI. Is like they think it's just going to be one more thing that's going to just overwhelm them, because we don't understand this technology except you do, and a handful of others, it seems like. But it seems like most people, it's bewildering to them, and it may be a little bit concerning to them.
Yeah, and I think there definitely is a potential risk for a seedier underbelly for artificial intelligence, right? So we mentioned at the top, so biases are one that we really need to be controlling for. Like, how are these models trained, and is it a way that handles biases, or does it not? And And then that's a question of, what's the ultimate expression of this technology? If it's facial recognition to identify criminals as you're walking through an airport in another country, you begin to need to be concerned, right? You wouldn't want to be detained in the airport because you looked like somebody else. That wouldn't be good. So I think some of that is just understanding what the expression or the use of that technology is going to be. And when it's things that begin to toe into infringement on your rights as a human, your right to privacy here in the United States, your, whatever those are, then we should all be digging in a little bit more, maybe not to understand, but to press on. Am I going to be protected in that exchange? Or is this piece of technology going to be making decisions for or against me that I need to be mindful of?
Right. And you were talking about facial recognition. China is doing that with the social scores and all that business. If you're not familiar with the social score out there, basically they can monitor just about every thought. It seems like every facial expression and every movement of your body and every act that you commit in China. And it calculates a score based on relative to how loyal you are to the Communist Party. And that's based on AI. And they could tell by, like, for example, you hear an announcement from Xi Jinping and your face goes one way, it's recorded. Or if you express, like a surprised look, okay, it'll record that if you look like you're happy or you're mad or whatever. And I think that's what people get really concerned about, is that it's so far ahead of us that we were joking about Skynet, but it can be used by bad actors.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there, right? So a lot of it to me has to do with artificial intelligence is just a tool, kind of back to, our nation needing to be investing in this because it's likely a tool that will be used against us. It really depends on who the user of the tool is and what their objectives ultimately are. So we should always come in with a healthy degree of skepticism based on who's going to be consuming this thing and using it. I'll circle to some interesting kind of underbelly with the way these models are trained. There was a very newsworthy facial recognition tool they were selling into, come to find out, third world countries that had known oppressive regimes, which is bad enough in and of itself, right? So they're profiting off of the oppression of people groups in those regimes. But there was also some problem with the way those models were trained, right? So these models are really only useful when you can get a lot of information through to them, when you can train them on large sets of data. So the way they trained their facial recognition model was by scraping the internet for public photos. And so, and listeners can think of how many photos do you have on Instagram? How many do you have on Facebook? How many do you have on, name the site that has pictures of you that are generally publicly available. And this company was pointing their tool at all of those pictures, pulling them all into their model so that they could learn how to recognize not just people, but specific people. And that's technically against the terms and conditions of a lot of those services, but it's a really hard thing to regulate, right? So if I'm Facebook, how do I make sure that some other organization is not scraping all of my pictures of people to train their facial recognition model? It's very, very difficult.
Right.
So they're already shady in the way that they're training their for sale product in a way that's not technically legal, but hard to pursue. And then they're selling that into, again, oppressive regimes to target people groups.
Is America ahead or behind the curve on this?
I think there's a lot of speculation here. It's probably an area where we don't really know, and everybody would like for it to stay that way.
Okay.
I'll say artificial intelligence is another one of those things that it's easy for our generations to think that this is a new thing, but I think this kind of a pattern has shown up time and time and time again. It's just a new expression of a little bit of the arms race. We're probably not really going to get the full story about where we stand as a nation or where others stand for many, many years to come. And hopefully it's not on the backside of an unfortunate realization of that.
Yeah, that'd be terrible. If the Chinese are ahead of us in this, but I'm sure the NSA and other security apparatus in our system uses this type of stuff. And so for guys of a certain age, I guess we're just more suspicious, about not just the whole process, but how it's used and who's using it and what's the purpose of it and whatever else. And then there's other maybe less threatening uses of AI, but that still affect the way we live. Like I was also reading about AI programs that write hit songs, because they could figure out the algorithm of a bunch of songs, and these were all popular songs, and I guess they can glean from those what were the elements of those songs that made them popular, and you'll just tap, 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 and write me a hit song. That ain't the way Mozart did it. It's not the way the Beatles did it. So I'm just saying, it's like that seems to me really artificial intelligence, that kind of creative process being taken over by a machine.
Yeah, it is really interesting, right? So again, I'm training this model to identify a pattern and to distill that down into its component parts. And once the model knows what the pattern is, I'm asking it to generate more things that are similar to that pattern, but discretely different. So fully original works is a really interesting use of AI that causes some concern. I'll give an example of, I saw a story just the other day about this gentleman that had an AI write a story. He used ChatGPT to do this. And, there were some things about the story he didn't like, but some parts that he liked. And an interesting thing about ChatGPT is I can tell it, well, I liked that, but write this in the style of, or take this particular bit of feedback and tweak the story. And it will continue to refine the original work that it produced for you based on that prompt. So he got the story and the characters to a point that he was satisfied with. And then he went to another tool by the same company, OpenAI, called DALL-E, that generates original works of art. And he said, well, produce these character art. So in the end, he produced a book, he published it, he released it on Amazon for purchase that was fully artificially intelligence written and composed, illustrated, written, and there was a general outroar.
Did he put it on Amazon and make that full disclosure that it was AI, or did he pass it off as his own?
Yeah, so that's an interesting kind of murky spot in the story that I don't know that I don't certainly have a straight answer to, but I think even if he represented it as such, some of what the art community in particular chafed at is their concern and speculation that these AI models for generating art have been trained on scraping the internet for publicly available art from artists. So if you have... there are a number of sites where I can go as an artist and post my original work, hoping somebody will buy it or license it for use in other places. Well, if it's publicly available, which often it is, because we want people to find our work and license it, this model can go out there and train itself on how to create things like that I create without my permission, and ultimately work me out of the ability to do that thing, because instead of commissioning an artist to illustrate a book, somebody can just go give a prompt to an AI tool to ultimately illustrate a book. But it's challenging because although they're original works that AI is generating, they're derivative of what the AI model was trained on. So there's this really interesting gray area of, is that really original, or is it on the shoulders of real humans that did that work?
Right,
and what does that mean for us as a...
Well, I know one thing it means. It means no royalties. I mean, if they base a song off, all the data of a popular hit songs or of a certain style of songs, all those artists that contributed to that raw data set get jack, right? They don't get anything. Same thing with the artists, and I could see why they'd be very upset, because now I don't have to pay some artist. I can just do this, and boom, I got original artwork that nobody could sue me for, because how are you going to say this piece of work you got from me because it was from a mass compilation of how many thousands, if not more, different pieces of art?
Yeah, I think it points at a bigger fundamental problem as a culture and a society that we need to kind of wrestle with, and that's just the amount of our information that to us individually is useless, but when aggregated is really useful. A separate group, my location data. Like, certainly I may not want everybody to know where I'm at, but my browsing data, like, that's not materially useful to me. I can't do anything with it. But if I'm Google and I can aggregate enough of that, it starts to become useful. The same thing with art. Like, I'm an artist, I post my pictures for sale, not a big deal. But if somebody can come along and aggregate that and create value out of it, it creates this really unfortunate, in my opinion, power differential, that the people that can derive value from those things are those that have a lot more money, revenue, ability. Like, I'm sorry, Brad, you and I couldn't probably pull any of those things off, but folks that are, like those investing in the OpenAI project as a company, like Bill Gates, Elon Musk, at last read, they certainly have the money to benefit and further their drives and initiatives based on something like that us individually don't, and yet in some way we're contributing to their ability to do it. And yet we do it every day. We sign up for Google, we use it for free. The old rule of thumb in the cybersecurity space is if it's free, you're the product.
Yeah, right.
And that's a pretty good frame of reference for a lot of these things today.
Well, I'm thinking though. Let's say I'm an ambitious author, and I have AI write a book in the style of Ernest Hemingway, and I don't tell people, say I purport it as my own, and people praise my work as he's very derivative of Hemingway, and influenced by other stuff. Same thing with music is what I'm thinking of as primarily, I really, to me, the production of a song or a piece of art or a work of literature is an internal thing that you produce through a lot of effort and a lot of talent and skill, not because you have a right computer program. And they get to the chat PGT thing. They got several of my English teachers concerned is these programs could produce, essays based on the rubrics that they're given about what to write about. And how are you going to be able to tell we have this thing, it's not new technology certainly, but when they turn in essays, you could scan it for plagiarism. Turnitin.com, there's several of them like that. Well, you can't, these aren't plagiarizing.
So in my line of work, working with content creators and instructors training cybersecurity people, we go through that step as well, right? So we want to make sure that it really is an original bit of work from these content creators, and it's not just simply derivative or worse than that, just blanket plagiarism. But this, you're right, this does break a lot of that. And I think it's easy to get Chicken Little about these things a bit, but as a note of some comfort and solace to those concerned about these things is a couple of points I'll make. One, if I remember correctly, it was actually a high school student who wrote a program that could identify AI-generated text.
Yes, I read about that, yes.
There's a flip side to this, right? So AI in and of itself is not bad nor good. It's just a tool. So as much as it can be leveraged for ill, it can be leveraged to combat itself as well. So it's really in who the wielder of the technology is. And I'm sure this is an exceptional young person that wrote this tool, but
it must be.
AI
has been
its,
like Gage here. You think? Yeah.
We're setting ambitions high for you.
Yeah, right.
For a high school student to be able to step in and write a program that can identify these AI-generated pieces of content is probably a picture of how the arms race for AI is going to go. It likely will be a new frontier of kind of a cat and mouse race, which many things in our history as humans have been that way.
And you build some kind of weapon system, the next guy will build one just as better, but plus 10% better.
Yeah, 100%. But because a high school student can do it, that definitely proves that it can be done. Back to the example about the art community that was really up in arms about this book. They went out and in their portfolios online, they generated and aligned around a particular graphic that said no AI, I believe, on it. And they started plastering it across all of their portfolios, across a number of platforms. And what happens now is as those models go out to learn how to look at human-generated art, a preponderance of what's freely available are this no AI logo. So it breaks the model. So you can't just say, here's an art site, go crawl it. Now all of a sudden as a human, I have to intervene even more to say, no, that's not real art, that's not real art, that's not real art. So we have a number of ways that kind of humans collectively banding together that we can break some of these models and how they're trained. So I think there's a number of ways to combat these things. Part of it's just being informed, and part of it is us continuing to be clever as we have been as a species to break them.
Well, the people that put this together, particularly to plagiarize or to create essays, novels, poems, whatever, I've read that they have instructed these models, they can write it in the style of a 17-year-old high school kid in a sense. So, because if I got something from a 17-year-old kid and it's, sounds like a PhD thesis or something like that, a dissertation, I'm going, okay, dude, where'd you get this? And I've done that before. I mean, I've had kids that wrote and they wrote okay or maybe not so great, and all of a sudden they turn something in and it's fantastic. I'm like, okay, dude, where'd you get it?
Yeah, I think the challenge in that though, Brad, becomes like using the plagiarism tools. You know that they did it.
Yes, right.
You know that it was plagiarized and not their original work. But now with an AI tool, you may know that that's clearly not the Washington Post story that you mentioned.
Right.
The professor knew that this is by far the best paper I have ever seen. This is not at the level that college students in my class do. This is not that person's work, but they couldn't verify it because it was not plagiarism.
Right.
So it does get really interesting. But again, I encourage all the listeners that There are low-tech solutions to a number of these things. Whether we want to adopt them or not is a separate discussion. Whether we should have to is a separate discussion. But in the case of that one particular professor, he's already worked ways around the problem. So instead of just sending people off to go write a paper to turn it in, they're going to do revisions in class. And he will see each of the revisions. So now what he's doing, instead of grading a paper as the final product, he's kind of having to come alongside students in the process and train the process and observe along the way. And I would argue, coming from a training background myself, that's probably relatively good alignment to the outcomes and the training that you're wanting to give people as they're writing things.
Well, one thing I have noticed in some of the articles I've read about education in particular, that they're almost regressing back to, pencil and paper days. Because they don't have the ability, in the classroom to write in something where the teacher's standing right there and access AI. But like I was talking about, one of the problems that the high school teachers have is if you get something that's fantastic, you give yourself away. It's like two guys cheating on a test with each other and you all get the same questions wrong, right? But if you have it written in a style of a 17-year-old, it may be factually correct on whatever else, but it may have subtleties or nuances about it that make you think that maybe it was a kid that wrote it, but it was actually written by AI because the program was set up to mimic the writing style of a 17-year-old as opposed to, some doctoral scholar or something like that. And so it's really good. It's really, really tough. And, and one of the problems I had as a teacher sometimes is when I said, okay, I really suspect this has been generated somewhere else. They obviously didn't have AI back then, but they had cut and paste, all right? And so sometimes you can cut and paste into Google and all this other stuff. But if you better make really sure as a teacher that you got the evidence to back up a plagiarism claim or you're sticking way out there. And but it was time consuming.
Yeah, 100%. Like if you go back to I'm old enough to remember when computers weren't necessarily in the classroom 100%. Yeah. So when we wrote papers, we had to cite sources, but nothing prevented us from ripping off and effectively copy and pasting manually what was in that book. And it was still a similar situation that we're in now. Like you had to know that was well above Will's writing ability to confront me about it. And I could try to lie to you all day long, but my point is, some of these things are similar expressions. This is just the latest implementation of it. And as soon as we get ahead a little bit, we do regress a bit. So I could copy paste text out of a book. And as a teacher, you're going to have to go try to find the sources that I used. And even out of a small high school library, you may be hard pressed to find that particular source.
You have 130 students. But, but one of the things that gave me an advantage is because my students wrote enough for me that I could tell after about the third or fourth time, okay, this is what I should expect from them. And if they got something really terrible, that's one thing, because that was helpful for me to know that this is well below their standards. So I could go to that student and say, hey, kid, what's the problem here? You usually write pretty well, but this was not your standard. And I find out some story, maybe they had 2 other tests that day and they just didn't have time for it, or there's some other crisis, who knows. But that's because I knew the students. And what's happening, particularly online, I don't know my students. And, I may never see their faces. I don't teach online as much as some do. But that's another area that's a real problem, is that you could have AI do the entire course for you. And, never hardly you have to ever attend to the program at all.
Yeah, I think there are stopgaps though. And some of this again comes back to me is like, how do we exercise? What we need to all admit is that AI is ultimately a machine expression. And how do we combat that from a uniquely human perspective?
Right.
The machine's not going to sit down to the test and pass it. The machine's not going to sit down to a standardized exam where there are proctors and write it for you. So yes, is it impactful? I'm not denying that. I fully expect that in the education space in particular, as much as there are tools that people can use to help themselves write better, there will be just as many tools to help educators combat that. It may take some time, but there are, again, changes that we can make to the process, places that we can interject things that circumvent the use of tools like this. To your point, like knowing the students, you do a writing assignment there in class and see what they're capable of.
Right, and that's what some of my colleagues are doing. They're basically anything that's going to be graded has to be done in front of them practically. And it may have to be done by hand, manually with a pen, paper. Have you ever heard of such a thing? And you, there's another way you could tell. Also, if you have a student that, really excels in writing and that has no concept of the material and blows the test like with a 30, maybe it's a testing issue, that needs diagnosis and some sort of adjustment and accommodation. But quite often is they didn't know the material because they didn't know it in the first place. And you get that, as a teacher, they were making good grades on X, Y, and Z, and all of a sudden, boom, they were 30. Okay, somebody was skipping a few steps.
Yeah, and I think rubrics for writing, they make it harder for these models too. So you can't necessarily pass your rubric through the model and say, write it exactly like this. Like it's work to get the models, these AI tools to do that kind of thing. Because they're generally just trying to produce a wholly original work. So as a professor, as a teacher, like here's the rubric you have to follow. An AI tool is not necessarily going to follow that rubric, no matter how well written that it is.
The ChatGPT program, is it a for-profit outfit?
ChatGPT is ultimately yes. It will be. So the interesting thing about that tool in particular is it is freely available now.
Well, that's what I was thinking. I thought it was just free for downloading.
Well, you can just do it in your browser, which almost makes it even more challenging. There is a 4-paid version of it that's capable of a little bit more. OpenAI, to my reading, hasn't been totally clear as to why they're making the tool freely available. My guess would be is that they're wanting to build a little bit of steam for themselves and for their company and to give a proof point of what the technology is capable of. That brings in more dollars, right? But at the end of the day, my full expectation, and even in their language on the website, is it's free for now.
Right.
But the reality is that there have been AI-powered blog writing tools and copy generating tools for a very, very long time. They just haven't surfaced to this level yet.
Well, at the tail end of my high school career, I wouldn't say AI was becoming a thing, but having your essays, your papers, whatever else written for you in a style that you want with a lot of computer assistance, which I guess is AI, was starting to become a thing. But then I left the high school level. Now I'm at the college level, DBU, and of course, Dallas Baptist kids would never cheat, lie, or steal. It's a sometimes people get tempted when they're under a lot of stress. I'll put it that way. But it is an issue that DBU has mentioned to us, and that there's probably going to be workshops on it, how to recognize it, how to detect it, what to do about it, how you should regard a work from a student that, let's say you find out it is from artificial intelligence. Does that student get credit for it or not? I don't think they should, but you never know.
Yeah, it is interesting, right? So you were talking about kind of exiting your career in high school. Like there are tools that, spell check.
Yeah.
Grammarly is a tool we use in my line of work very often to check for grammar. Right? I mean, it'll do all kinds of things that, basic spell check in the day certainly would not do. Now, does that mean that I'm a less qualified writer? Well, if you make me do it on paper, it certainly does. But there are some really interesting questions for us as a culture to nail down, I think. And that's at the end of the day, if somebody's using the tool and using it well, how much does that matter?
A much more simplified version is that predictive text on your phone. Drives me crazy too, and I've sent some things in and I had to very much apologize in a hurry because predictive text or whatever just got in the way. And I guess Siri and Alexa and all that are another versions of AI in a sense.
Yeah, you can. They are absolutely training those models.
Yeah.
Some of the problem that Amazon got into with Alexa recently, like they were keeping everything, and there were humans that had oversight and the ability to hear those things.
Right.
And some ethical concerns about what happens if they hear something that they shouldn't. What do they do? And well, it wasn't even supposed to be listening to me, but was it really? And those things are not new. Again, they're, I think, just have been exacerbated, and maybe our visibility finally is coming up to a higher level now that we see the expression of what some of those things can do.
Asking you to see what's in the future for AI is probably pretty tough to do because it takes so many different forms. But say in the very near term, how are people going to recognize AI in their lives?
I think we've got to be informed that it's something that we should be watching for.
What should they be watching for?
Again, you should circle back to culturally, legislatively, we need to be asking questions of our legislators, of those that make decisions in high-powered places, of we need to have some basic rights. We need to understand where AI may be impacting us. Again, anywhere you start to see potential privacy impacts, We really need to be digging in. I think, as with many things, national security, as one example, like there is a lot that we trust our representatives and our government to do for us. And I think whether we like it or not, this is likely one of those areas at that level
Good grief.
that we're going to have to trust. And I'll admit that I don't know that I have a whole high degree of faith when many of our representatives don't even really know what the internet is all about. So probably a place for us to show up and ask questions as an informed electorate. We can talk another day about how informed we are as an electorate. But,
well, that's great. You can come back on the show at a future date and we could do it.
yeah, but we need to be looking out. We need to see how those things are impacting us. I think just knowing to ask the question is probably a really good start.
Is also the very strong possibility of misinformation in the news media being generated by AI. Is that a possibility?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's another thing I'm concerned is that you're going to have a situation where they could manufacture maybe just about any kind of video or visual evidence to support some story that's totally false. Now, and the thing is, on the other side of the coin, if it's unpleasant or derogatory information or embarrassing information or hurts a political career, they could always claim it's AI, and we're not going to know, was it AI? Was it not AI? And that really bothers me a lot more than about anything else, is that the people in power can use this, not just the AI itself, but the fear of AI itself, to basically muddy the water such that we can't believe anything we're seeing or hearing. You talk about false news, fake news, and all this other stuff. I mean, this really is fake news. And they could generate this kind of stuff. I mean, it's like watching a Mission Impossible movie. I thought, wow. When you first see it, when it comes out, you think, that's really cool. 5 years after you see it 5 years later, said, they've been doing that for several years now. That's no big deal. I saw Mission Impossible 1 about 3 months ago and thought, I could probably do that. And I don't know anything about computers. I mean, that's nothing, and all this other stuff. I'm just saying that's where I'm really concerned about, is the information age being hijacked by AI, because either you're going to have people creating false narratives or calling them false narratives when they're really true, and we're not going to know.
No, we're not. I read an article the other day. It was talking about, positing, what are we doing to our children by posting publicly available images and videos, so many of them. It's very likely that they'll live in a world where if somebody wants to make a video purporting to be them with a voice that sounds like them, with a video image that looks like them, that will be somewhat trivial to do. And I know today that sounds really, really scary. It probably will be, and it probably will be impacting for our young people at that point. But I think the only solace, the only comfort that I can give myself is that as much as there will be technologies that can do that, I have to believe there will be technologies that can help us identify those things as well.
And this might sound like a silly example, but you see on Facebook and you see memes or pictures, and you push the button and they start singing, all right, and their facial movements and all this other stuff. That's what you're talking about. Exactly what you're talking about is, in 2-3 years, that might be a much more sophisticated level of technology than just having somebody, little facial meme mimic some song lyrics or whatever else. But,
I mean, it's really there now. So I would be very shocked to believe that there are not certain nation states that are creating propaganda based on deep fake technology, making whatever world leader that they want say whatever they ultimately want to. And are they going to put that out on the world stage? No, they're not. But can they influence a populace to get behind something that's largely unpopular based on vilifying somebody? But Brad, that's propaganda, and that's been propaganda for years and years.
Well, it's like Forrest Gump. You've seen that movie, I'm sure, and they have these historical figures, and it's obvious that they're imposing their facial movements on the characters that Gump is encountering, like Johnson and Kennedy and whatever else. But and so it's pretty, it's simplistic, and it's being manipulated. My fear is if they made Forrest Gump again, just like that, it'll be, you think, wow, did Kennedy really say that? How did Forrest Gump get in that picture? That kind of stuff.
Yeah, and we have a number of movies where that's been the case lately, right? Where unfortunately an actor has passed away early and they wanted to get them back in the film.
Right.
I think a Star Wars film and a Fast and Furious film are two examples I can think of. And if you didn't know, you may not realize that was actually done. So that technology is definitely there. It's definitely capable.
Well, I feel better now. I'm really great. I'll just go home and turn off all the electronic devices and, and they'll just be happy. I'll start sending things by carrier pigeon or something. I don't know, but it's like, it's a brave new world, literally. And it's really, a lot to comprehend, and I'd like to do this again.
Yeah,
And
happy to.
maybe bring Sarah along and we could talk about politics and such.
Oh gosh, I might stay out of that particular realm. I'm much more comfortable in this one.
Oh
than I
yeah,
am
you
that.
let her do all that kind of stuff, and
That's right.
you're in the background, and I enjoy watching y'all on the Facebook. It's like the saga of the Carlsons, and all the three of these boys are on all over, and and it's like it sounds like a little piece of heaven over there. You boys ever fight?
No.
Okay, see, I can't imagine that. Really, I mean, I know boys should, but they're like, I don't know. They may argue about what is the proper declension of this French noun here, but as far as
There's definitely plenty of bickering, but it's safe to say I don't know that we often come to fisticuffs.
no, but I'm just saying it's like what they probably argue about is who is the greatest, who's better, Monet or Monet, and that kind of stuff. Or
No, I know we were just debating the other day of how bad Johnson really was as a president. So
Really?
yeah.
And and the first time I met this young man, he says, "Have you read Federalist Number 40?" And I'm like, yeah. Well, most of my college kids, they would be amazed to know there was something known as Federalist Number 40. He said, "Well, I was reading it the other day." I'm like, "What? Who is this 12-year-old kid?" So
They definitely eclipse me in ability. So I think that's my hope for things, all things AI and scary in the world, is that I'm just going to leave it to them because they're much more capable than I am.
are you narrowing down your college choices yet, sir?
Majors or
No, the schools.
haven't started that yet. I've started getting letters though.
There's a great school in Waco. All right, so check out Baylor. They'll be glad to have you.
Speaking of biases, and
Yeah, and that's I've been accused of that before. Oh, here it is. Your wife says, "Ha, we were doing Latin declensions this morning. They argue about presidents, and there you are." Okay, so your mama was watching, making sure you behaved, I suppose.
oh, not him, probably me.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you being here. My head hurts a little bit, so but that's good. I learned something. I hope people that listen to this pass it along. I don't know how much they can get from it, because a lot of people my age, my generation, when I discovered PowerPoints, I thought I'd landed on the moon. So, Taylor, you probably understood this, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Oh, yeah. I'll see y'all here Thursday. We're going to have Dr. Lindsay Bird with the Burleson ISD School Choice Program. We're going to learn how that works, because next week is the time you start signing up for it. So tune in Thursday and get the info that you need. And I'll see you later.
Thanks.